Download our app today at newwavetkd.com.
Hello and welcome to the Martial Perspective. Today is April 19th, 2026, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Grandmaster Chuck Chirdon. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing good, John. How are you?
Great, great. Thank you for being on the show. Looking forward to hearing about the life and martial arts history that is Grandmaster Chuck Chirdon.
All right, yeah, John, I appreciate you having me on. This is kind of an honor to talk to you guys about some of the stuff that's gone on through the last 55 years plus with Koroshi School of Defense and what we've kind of been about.
55 years, wow. You know, that's almost seems like a lifetime to contribute to martial arts. And I'm sure you've seen some changes and some things that you like and you didn't like. And, you know, I couldn't even imagine.
Yeah, there's been a lot of changes, obviously, from 1971. Some have been great, some have been not so great in the life of martial arts. But if nothing else, suffice it to say, it's been a complete change over those years as well. Doesn't seem like it's been that long because it's gone by quickly, but it certainly has.
So let's get started here, sir. So
Sure.
When did you start your martial arts training? 1971, you said?
Yeah, I started February of 1971 with a school that had just opened up in Paynesville, Ohio. Operated at that time by Tom Benich and Melvin Russell, and kind of stumbled into it from a demonstration I saw at my high school, and ended up meeting Buddy Brown and Craig Clinton there, and we kind of traveled through there together for many years. I was one of those young kids not doing so well at 15 years old, sort of getting in trouble, and I saw a demonstration of a young guy by the name of Jim Bain, one of Tom Benich's early students, doing a forms demonstration and showing people what was coming to town in Paynesville, and really thought that I had found the secret to everything I've ever wanted to know in just watching that demonstration.
What did he do that demonstration? Do you remember?
He did some self-defense, and then he demonstrated one of his green belt forms, which at that time is today known as Basai Sho. And more than anything, his athleticism and the movements and the characterization of that form really spoke to me in a way I had never imagined. I had no idea what karate was or martial arts, or certainly at that time taekwondo or tang soo do. All I know is that what I saw this young man doing, and with what I had going in my personal life for many years, just came together completely. I grew up, as probably many of us did, in a somewhat normal household. Didn't have a lot of money. We were kind of poor, but I grew up with the attachment of a mentally retarded brother all of my life, who I loved dearly, and I spent a lot of time fighting when I was young, defending what at that time and probably is today, what kids could be very cruel. And when they saw somebody different, they kind of spoke out about it and tended to make fun of them. And I always jumped into action, didn't always win those fights, but felt it was my responsibility to take care of him. Now, when I saw the martial arts demonstration, I don't mind telling you that I looked at it sort of like, geez, this is my secret weapon. If I learn this, I can take care of Pete forever.
Yes, sir. Did they kind of lay off him after you kind of started your martial arts training?
Well, things change, as you might imagine, with any kid going through the martial arts. At that time, it was a very mysterious, mystical time for the martial arts. Bruce Lee had just started doing his thing, and David Carradine. So people were just being introduced to what was going on and watching all the movies with Chuck Norris and so forth. So describing all of this to people was very difficult because they never had a basis to understand it from. The Ninja Turtles weren't on the scene yet. No. As a matter of fact, when I visited the school for the first time, I got presented with this annual contract for, I think at that time, John, was like $265, which was like a shocking amount. And I took this home, and my parents looked at each other and thought, well, first of all, what is karate? And secondly, what ever made you think we were going to sign this contract? Consequently, they didn't. I found it rather unique to put their name on it myself,
Mhm.
and I was enrolled.
Oh, wow. So we all face obstacles in the martial arts. I mean, be it something at home, be it, something at, you're having a difficult time, mastering moves, or, financial, or whatever it is. What do you think your biggest obstacle was growing up in the martial arts?
I think, frankly, I think the biggest obstacle was trying to understand what all this was about.
Hmm.
I thoroughly was infatuated with the idea of it and the physical ability. I had wrestled in high school and junior high, and and did a little bit of football, that type of stuff.
Hmm.
So I think really the biggest obstacle at that time for me was fulfilling the needs I thought my instructor had of me. Tom was just an outstanding martial artist, and he has a historical background himself. And he and Melvin challenged me with some things I had never done before.
Hmm.
And for a long time getting started, I just had this overwhelming feeling that, boy, am I going to be able to live up to this, and and perform like I thought they expected, and I and had hoped for. And now the good side about that is it drove me 5, 6 days a week to train at the dojo every day and night I possibly could be, and that had some very positive, consequential events. Got me off the street, taught me a lot of values, improved me in school, all that sort of thing. Um, so really, I would say initially that was the biggest obstacle when I started training, is just living up to what I saw as their standards. I could have walked into a school that would have been absolutely nothing, and an instructor it would have been very mediocre and perhaps, not very skilled at all. Fortunately for me, I walked into a school with extremely high standards, attached to the United States Karate Association, um, connected with two or three instructors in the Cleveland area that were really high level.
Hmm.
That was by design or by mistake, but it certainly could have been the opposite. After achieving my black belt, that whole challenge changed. Going to tournaments from a very early Q rank from yellow belt up, and starting to get involved in competing, I also realized that was the next hurdle. Geez, I'm in among a group of people that are just fantastic. I don't mind telling you that being a younger student and a very young black belt at that time weighed upon me heavily. It drove me, but it weighed upon me heavily, especially when I started competing.
Hmm. So is that school still around, or is that lineage still around? I mean, from when you first started?
Koroshi School of Defense is alive and doing well. We have three basic locations: Painesville, Ohio, where
Not far from me.
right where Buddy Brown and a couple of our other black belts, Frank and Randy, teach. Craig
Hmm.
Clinton is in Ashtabula, and has been for many years. And myself in Newark and Zanesville, Ohio, where I teach with my wife Anita and my top-ranking student down here, Brad Seward. Um, I can tell you this, John, we are as tight today as we ever were, even in the 70s and early 80s. Um, I teach privately and I do seminars for the most part.
Hmm.
Anita helps with a lot of younger students out of Brad's, but the whole unit gets together probably 3 or 4 major events each year amongst the Koroshi group.
Hmm.
And we do everything from share what we're doing and working out to staying very close, involved with our families, and really pretty much taking care of each other. Myself, Buddy Brown, and Craig Clinton are the three grandmasters that Tom brought up with Melvin Russell, and we have a group of black belts that work under us that
Hmm.
really keep the whole thing together. I depend on, since Anita's close to my age, she's with me most of the time, but I
Yeah.
depend on Brad Seward and my son Jesse to really carry the Koroshi name down here in
Hmm.
Newark, Ohio. And Craig has several black belts in Ashtabula, as does Buddy in the Painesville area. So it's one of the few original units, back in the day, as we say, that has stayed together and that has maintained its performance levels and stayed relevant to the martial arts today.
Now, a couple of months ago, I spoke to Grandmaster Clinton. I wasn't aware that you guys were connected or intertwined. From my understanding, he teaches out of his house. He does have some black belts. But yeah, he agreed to be on the show. I just got to get back because he was going on vacation or something like that. So, but fantastic guy. But I had no idea that your lineage was so closely connected with somebody that I have spoken to prior.
It's closer than you think. Craig and I took our black belt tests side by side.
I'm gonna have to reach back out.
A typical Koroshi test is 6 to 8 hours of a lot of what you've done. It's grueling. It's really a demonstration of your skills. And Craig and I'm very proud to have stood side by side with Craig back in 1973 in August and taken that test in front of Tom and Melvin.
Oh wow! So let me ask you this: do you think you stated that you had like a kind of a little bit of a trouble, you kind of like a bad boy type persona when you were growing up? Do you think martial arts has made you a better human being?
Well, let's put it this way. At 15 years old, I don't mind telling you that, again, I kind of grew up in the poor side of town, hung around with the wrong people. I was drinking and fighting at the age of 14. I had a D average in school. And I had a saint of a mother, thank God for her, because that's what kept me from the next level down. Mm-hmm. And when I met Tom Benich and started training at Koroshi, in the last 2.5 years of 3 years of high school, I was a 4.0 average student. I was the first one in our class to ever hit the National Honor Society, and then got involved doing some police work with Tom, and my career skyrocketed after graduating. Mm-hmm. So, has the martial arts done anything for me? Absolutely everything. That, backed by my Christian faith, has driven everything I've done in my entire life. And quite frankly, in spite of obstacles and losing people around me, I've had one of the most blessed lives you could ever have.
That's fantastic, sir. And you met a lot of very, very close family-like friends along the way of your journey, correct?
Oh, certainly. That's one of the biggest. I think one of the biggest things about Koroshi today is that many of us have many family members involved, and at a black belt level. My sister, some nephews. I could go on and on. Buddy Brown has the same thing, and his grandson Craig and his son and others in his family. So as Koroshi as a family has grown, it's gotten wider just by other parts of our family being involved. And what's really cool now is that with having the different locations throughout Ohio, we've been able to branch out even larger and bring in other people. As I mentioned before, Brad Seward out of Zanesville, he and I have been training together for 20 years now. I'm so pleased with how good of a black belt Brad is. I have my companion, my wife Anita, with me all the time. She and I are able to work out together literally any moment we want. And we've stayed involved with other kids in the martial arts, which has been a big part of our lives for quite a while now. I was gifted and really blessed in the early years to compete with the USKA, and then shortly after that, the PKA, the original kind of full contact counter kicks type competition. I did well. I didn't always win, but I did well over the years. Won some money. Came to realize that that's not what I want to do for a living, as far as competition goes. But it was the kind of experience I really needed to drive me to the next thing. And then since then, Anita and I moved out to Iowa for 2 or 3 years. We had a karate school out there, and taught the entire police department of Eldora, Iowa. Total population of 3,000. So I think our students were probably 10% of the population.
Yeah. Wow.
So great experiences like that.
So tell me a little bit about Koroshi Karate. Like, what's the background of it?
Okay, so Tom Benich received his first degree black belt from Commander Kistler in Miami University in Ohio around 1970, 69 or 70. And his black belt was in Tung Sudo, which I know you're very familiar with.
Yes, sir.
So we started out and we were, for the most part, based upon that Tung Sudo training. Some of the differences that come in is that the influence of some of Tom's other instructors, Ilju Kim as one, which was Ilju Kim teaches Songwukwan, Robert Moore, who is a name that if you don't know, you really need to Google, one of the most fantastic practitioners in the United States and part of the world, who was a Jidoquan instructor. And then I think the serious connection that kind of pulled that together is we were very influenced and had very close connections with Robert Trias and the United States Karate Association. Tom was one of the few Trias International Patch Award winners, performed in front of the Queen of England with the USKA team.
Wow.
And as you might know, that the USKA under Robert Trias is a Shore-Ru system that Master Trias brought to the United States. So the influences were great, meaning that we had basically a Tung Sudo Taekwondo background. It was heavily influenced with Shore and their techniques. And we had the people we worked with in the Cleveland area, like Algin Corellia, teaching Kaju Kempo. So we were influenced constantly. I was awarded the opportunity to fight for the Cleveland Black Belt team the last year or so with Tom, and we trained at Algin's school every month. You can't help but be influenced by those people that you're working with. So no matter what style or system you might be originally, those influences come into play strongly. Koroshi is not a dedicated style organization. Koroshi School of Defense is just that. We teach people how to defend yourself. While we operated the primary Koroshi school in Paynesville, Ohio, we brought in and hired Linda Vecchio, who's one of the widely known Aikido instructors, and she held classes for us there at Aikido. So we got that influence of how to work closely against somebody. We had a judo instructor for 2 years, Mohan Kim, and it was in an effort to round out our students, to make sure that if you're taken to the ground, you understand what to do and how to defend yourself from that spot. You went from more of a hard technique in Tung Sudo to understanding how Aikido works and the advantages of working those techniques. And those influences have spread, and we've kept a lot of those in place. Anita, Brad, and I spent a lot of time working our students in judo and how to, build your self-defense around those techniques as well. And I know that Buddy and Frank and Randy Pengov was a direct student of Linda Vecchio and studied Aikido for many years under. So those influences go directly into your art. They can't be helped. And really, it's the best thing to do because there is no simple one style that's better than any other. And what we're talking about is basically self-defense and combat.
So it's safe to say that Koroshi karate is an early form of really mixed martial arts because you're taking.
Absolutely.
Here.
Absolutely. Tung Sudo or Taekwondo based, but could not help but be influenced by all the other instructors we interacted with. Certainly.
Right. So your opinion on learning it's practical to learn more than one martial arts style is pretty prevalent, correct?
Yeah, certainly, John. And what I would tell students today is find your school, find your style or system, that you have the interest in. Get to your black belt level and understand that system in depth and completely. Along the way, you should be getting instruction on break falling, how to do, work ground techniques, instruction on how not to break things on your body, but basically stay with that style or system to black belt. And then after that, John, in a paper I wrote called After Black Belt, you should be moving on to the next phase. You should be moving on to another expertise that can enhance and really empower what you've learned already. And I think to me that is the challenge, and it should be the scope of what a first degree black belt should be doing. That and teaching, learning how to teach.
So when you met your wife, you were already knee deep in the martial arts.
Yes, I was.
So, did you find it? Was it? Were you all in when she expressed a desire to learn the martial art?
We we have a great time talking about this frequently. When I met Anita, it had nothing to do with the martial arts at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we met, we were attracted. As a matter of fact, the day we met, I was slated to do a tournament at OJKA the next day. And I remember my last words were, "Hey, look, I got to go home. I know it's not real late. I got to get up and go to the tournament tomorrow." And I remember her reaction as she rolled her eyes and was thinking to herself, "Well, that's the last time I'm going to hear from him." Now, obviously, as it turned out, it wasn't the last time. Um, I was I was reluctant to just take her on as a student immediately because I didn't want it to affect, our personal relationship.
Right.
Um, and at that time, I just are you really interested in the martial arts, or are you just like interested in what I do? So Anita watched. Geez, I bet for 6 months to a year, she just watched classes. She actually knew our first two or three forms by memory before she ever stepped on the floor.
That's very impressive.
So I give her a lot of credit that I figured if the time went by and she lost kind of interest, well, I probably did the right thing. But just the opposite happened. Her interest grew and grew, and then she began training and moving around in the martial arts quite quickly. She's a previous athlete from before, doing a lot of work with skating and roller skating and horseback riding. So she was a natural athlete. It was not difficult to teach her at all, and she's a smart gal, so she picked up on it quickly.
So, as a long-time martial arts instructor, obviously you run into students where it can be a chore to teach them. So, what pitfalls do you find you fall into when you find if a student that's a little rougher on the edges that you're trying to mold and teach them and guide them the way of the martial arts?
Okay, you broke up just a little bit there. The last part of that question was,
How do you change your teaching technique when you find somebody is having a hard time learning your martial art when you're teaching?
okay, so if you ask my peers, they all like to call me a technician. And I sort of understand that. To me, the martial arts, and I'm an engineer, so bear with my explanations a little bit. To me, the martial arts has a lot to do with physics.
Mm-hmm.
We all know the basic moves, stances, techniques that are incorporated, working through and throughout those stances. So when I find students that have, we'll call it more difficulty, and I find that with students who are not necessarily previous or natural athletes, that can be the most challenging. I break it down and make sure that all the basics I'm teaching them, especially their leg movement, is done in a very precise manner and that they understand the background behind it. It's one thing to show somebody a forward stance and allow them to mimic what you're doing, which is great, and that's the way the old masters did it. It's another to explain to the student why we move in that fashion. What is the rather than rise up and lower down when we're moving in a forward stance, we travel a straight line, shortest distance between 2 points, keeps your balance and your coordination in check. So I find that if I take my time and explain each one of those details, it begins to set a foundation in their mind. I tend to use little things to put in your mind of how to do something. When I teach somebody a stance, I tell them the front knee's bent, rear legs locked, shoulders square, feet fore and aft. And I build that rhyme in their head. And that tends to keep them, pretty much in line. But I would tell you that I'm very careful that I teach what the student can absorb.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important today because people absorb things at completely different rates. And until I see what I'm after, I'll find another way to get it into their head or another way to have them execute that technique, especially when it comes to kicking, before I try and move on. and before I try and correct every little possible thing on it. To me, when you're teaching a student from white to brown or black belt, you're going to explain how to do something, you're going to demonstrate it, and you're going to explain why and how you're doing it. And you're looking for 60, 70% absorption rate the first time you do that, the first several weeks you do that. As time goes on and you see those things being accomplished or somewhat mastered, you start adding on to that. And then you add on to it, you add on to it, and you reach a point that really they've got a full understanding, and you're getting the feedback because you can see what they're doing, that they really do understand it. That's the physical part. The psychological part becomes a little bit more difficult. I personally have a difficult time in general with junior black belts. Not that I don't respect those young kids and what skills they've acquired, but to me, John, there's a psychological effect with the way I look at the martial arts. It's combat, and it's real combat. Whether you take the sporting aspect of it for a while or forever, or whether you focus seriously on the self-defense part, the martial arts is combat. It's difficult enough to give an 18-year-old an automatic weapon and send them to war and have them understand exactly what's going on until they've been shot at.
Right.
And then they grow up very quickly.
Oh,
in a lesser sense, when teaching the martial arts, if you've not been in a fight on the playground, if you've not, did some real rough things like, front line on a football team or something like that, you don't even understand or really truly appreciate the psychological effects of impact. All of us can probably remember the first day at a playground, somebody smacked us on the nose or in the side of the head, and that shock value that came out of that. You weren't hurt. You might have a bloody nose, but you really weren't hurt. But psychologically, you were destroyed.
Oh, absolutely.
I completely resist signing or giving a black belt to anybody who hasn't been through that, or I haven't taken through that. Because at least in our Koroshi system, when we assign a black belt, we take on that responsibility as instructors for the rest of their life as well. All my black belts know that on a given second, all they have to do is call me, and I'm there 100%. And if they're still training with me, it's my responsibility to continue to lead them and teach them whatever they need to know. So this psychological part I talk about, it has to happen. It's happened to a lot of my younger students. It happened to me as a brown belt. Tom Benich took me through something that I was completely in shock of. For our brown belt test back then, our Uki, our defender, was, garbed up in full training gear, boxing gloves, tennis shoes. We were in, without pads or anything, and he was told, go after him. So it was basically a full contact fight, but we were not allowed to destroy them. We had to completely control them. So what it did was put the psychological disadvantage on us. And I can tell you this, at the age of 17 or 18, it's one thing to go through that. When you're a little bit older, it may be something a little bit different.
Right.
But if you've never experienced that, you truly don't understand combat.
So
And
did they do
there.
that? Did they do that based on your ability to show self-control, or is it just something that they did because they wanted to put you through this psychological mind screw with you?
Yes, both.
Okay.
I remember 2 weeks before my black belt, I took off work, slept at the dojo, trained every day. I wanted to have my edge on. And several times during that 2 weeks, somebody came in at night and jumped on me and attacked me. Didn't stay long, and I had to defend myself. But it was purely that psychological development of maintaining control of your techniques. As you, I'm sure you know, as a black belt, John, too many times we train for many years. We may even compete, doing well or not. When the real moment of truth comes, and if you are placed in a position where you have to defend yourself, if you're not careful and if you haven't trained correctly, all of that goes out the window, and psychologically and mentally you refer back to kind of that basic instinct that you had before you even trained in the martial arts. So the key is to get beyond that point. You've got to get to the point that you've driven your techniques to the point that they are precision honed, they're perfect in your eyes anyhow. And then applying those to very difficult situations forces you to find out why they don't work in many cases, and then to correct that, and move up to that next level. And then, like I said, how uncomfortable is it when somebody walks up within a foot of you and gets in your space? That has a psychological effect. So in a real world scenario, when somebody's really coming after you or, has some reason to attack you, all of that happens, in split seconds and milliseconds. And if you haven't trained for that, you can have really good technique and it will not appear. It won't come out. And so that's probably the biggest hurdle and the biggest thing that I emphasize, especially with our brown belts who are getting ready for black belt. You gotta be taken through that psychological effect. There are many ways to do that, but I can tell you it has to be done.
So going back to 1971, 70s, when you started martial arts, it kind of, for some people, might feel like the Stone Ages, no pun intended. But, you obviously had to adapt with the times from 71 to 2026. Was that a difficult transition? I mean, it probably was a slow transition because in the 70s, things were a lot grittier. You trained in a dojo or dojang with wood paneling like I have behind me. And,
Right.
It was rough and tumble and it was a lot more intense. But as, we move forward to 2026, things, I hate to say it, but things have gotten a little softer. How do you adapt to that as a old school martial arts practitioner, instructor, now grandmaster?
John, I got to tell you, that is the question. That is the question. It's been difficult, but necessary to find the ways to not lose, at least not lose what I think is the true essence of martial arts. But yet adapt it. Let's face it. We were all bare knuckles back in the 70s, at least close to up to the 80s. So we got our foam gear and we thought we were invincible. And if you got hit, you got hit. My fault, not yours. I should have blocked better or should have moved in a different direction, and no one worried about it.
Right.
Today, everyone worries about it.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody's concerned about, am I being too hard? Am I not soothing, to these students and so forth? And there's nothing wrong with that at all because it's had to change. Our whole conception of what self-defense and battle has changed a bit. But again, somehow instructors have to find a way to hone their students to the point that they feel confident from brown belt up through black belt, whatever rank after that, that student can defend herself properly and save their own life, if not somebody else's. So yes, the teaching methods have changed, and the way I approach bringing that student through that psychological graduation, you might say, has changed a bit. But I'll give you an example. When my son was getting ready for his black belt, Jesse was 16 then, and he said, "Dad, come at me. Come at me for real." We were working self-defense one night. I said, "Okay, Jess."
Game on.
Game on. We were doing what we call back attacks. So his back was to me. I grabbed his shoulder, spun him around, and I hit him in the chest with 80% of what I have, avoiding breaking anything. And the look in his eyes, he literally collapsed to the floor, unhurt, was not hurt. But all of a sudden he realized, oh my God, this is life. This is real life. This is the way it's going to happen. And by the way, I couldn't do a damn thing about it. We spent the rest of that class for 2 hours and I know this because my right hand was sore, doing that same exercise over and over and over again, not because he couldn't learn how to block it, but he had to understand and feel in his mind he was going to defend against it every time and never fail again. And that's what I mean about the psychological value. In Jesse's case, it didn't take, some guy suited up during your test trying to knock the snot out of you. It just took one pre-designed exercise to make him realize that, oh, geez, this is way down the street from what I thought. I had no idea this is where I needed to be. And it worked out great. I've had other students who I've done similar things with, a little different, and got that psychological graduation, you might say.
Mm-hmm. So when you did that, looking back to that training session with your son, going to black belt, when you did that strike on him, the look in his eyes, can you describe what you saw in that look, as compared to the look after, he felt it and everything like that towards the end, where he was able to start defending against it? What was the difference in those two looks?
Jesse's eyes experienced ultimate fear and the complete inability to do anything about it. Mm-hmm. He realized at that moment, I have been knocked out, and there was nothing I could do about it. Nothing. Mm-hmm. And that feeling is so devastating or so depleting on somebody's ego. Now, and you could go, and here's the danger, it can go one of two ways. You got to be careful, because there could be a student that says, I'm done, I'm out of this. Right. This is the wrong thing for me to be doing. In his case, and like some others I've worked with, he realized that this is a mountain I didn't know existed. It was hidden by the clouds or whatever, but I have got to climb it, and I've got to get to the top. Mm-hmm. And that's what you really hope for, or what you try and design for.
Now, did you see that light click on when he finally got it, and he's like, okay, I can start to defend against this?
My son literally grew up overnight in 3 hours. That's the best way I can describe it. The psychological change I saw in him, and I also did this with my nephew earlier, the psychological change I saw was from boy to man immediately.
Wow.
It was.
So let's go back to your moment where your psychological change.
Right.
Who was the instructor that did that to you, that you're like, oh, damn, this just happened?
That would be Tom during my brown belt test. He and Robert Moore designed the Koroshi test, which is like 14 pages and 6 to 8 hours. And I had no idea that I was necessarily going to do this. I just knew that my self-defense or my WASs were going to be very hard and difficult. And at that time, we had to write ours out, practice our own. We had certain school self-defense maneuvers we had to do. And then we had to make those work against an uke. What they didn't tell me initially was that uke would have pads and tennis shoes on and was told to go at it full contact. Now, understand, I trained for 2.5 years before that, before I took my brown belt test, and I was doing okay. My techniques were working. I was winning at tournaments. But from a street connection, when this little bit larger person came at me in that manner, we all control stuff to some degree in the dojo. When he came at me in that manner, I realized in the first attack, I had to switch my whole line of thinking completely. Fortunately, I caught on pretty quick and realized that what was really important, if I stopped this person right now on his attack and reversed it, life got a lot better for the rest of the test. But that was what Tom and Melvin had taken me through at that time.
What was your hardest test that you had to go through?
I would actually say it was probably that brown belt test, because when I tested for black belt, maybe it was out of fear more than anything. Craig and I we were at each other every night, every day, for about a solid year. Any moment we had to train, while we were helping teach and that sort of thing, we did. And I don't know. I think it was more out of my fear of failure, not my fear of getting hurt, but my feel that I was going to either let down my instructor or I was going to let down myself, and have a breakdown and not be able to accomplish this. So I have to tell you that Craig and I spent 6-7 hours on the floor that day with Tom and Melvin, and I wish we would have had it videoed, because it was probably the proudest moment of my life for my career. And we planned and we trained accordingly to make sure we didn't fail.
Wow. So you came up with the PKA. My next question is, do you think the sport aspect of martial arts has softened martial arts? If so, why?
I think the sport aspect of the martial arts is extremely important. I think there are a few of us that might choose to try and make a career out of it. If you look at MMA today, man, those guys are tough. I wouldn't recommend it for a career, because now, being older, I know what kind of aches and pains you're going to go through, whether you realize or whether you expect it or not when you get older. It is a difficult life. If it's what you want to do, then be the very best of it. Be Bill Wallace. Go at it from that level. Train like Chuck Norris. But I think it has a very defined place. Obviously, all of us like to test our skills, whether they're athletic skills or just self-defense skills. And it's a good way to do that. What I tell people today is, you've really wasted your investment of training if you quit or slow down after the sporting aspect of it. We all have our reasons for coming to the martial arts. Some are very similar, some are a little different. And we have that reason to start out and get to our black belt. And we get there, and perhaps along the way, we found this, these karate tournaments we like to go to, and they're kind of a test of everything about us, our skills, our ego, our desire to prove something to ourselves or somebody. But you're going to climb that mountain, and you may do very well and you may do okay, and either one is great. But what do you do after that? Where do you go after that? What I think you should do is understand that our martial arts training is probably the most unique and best way to maintain your life and your health. John, what could be better for cardio than doing forms? What could be better for strength, aside from maybe weightlifting? What could be better than beating on a bag? What could be better for application than to have people coming at you and you get to take your techniques and design your defense? To me, that's a lifelong thing, and it has big payoffs along the way.
So, talking about life after competition, I competed for 10 to 12 years straight, heavily, multiple tournaments a year. I'm getting to the point where I really don't want to do that anymore. I enjoy it here and there, but it's the point where I just want to teach, and I want to explain, and I want to learn more. I just recently did a seminar with you, Grandmaster Perry, Master Anita, and Charlie Brown, Master Charlie Brown, and all that. And you actually brought something up to me that I was fascinated with. Method 1, Method 2, Method 3. Can you describe what Method 1, 2, and 3 is and how it came about? Because I was flabbergasted, because I've been kind of focusing on that since the Cleveland Martial Arts Hall of Fame seminar series.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is something I arrived at probably in the last 10, 12, 15 years at the most. Personally, I believe there is a direct a very, very direct line of connection between the practice of forms or kata or hyung or pumse and what you do with your self-defense. The old masters didn't do this for nothing, all right? And that connection to me is that one develops the skills necessary for the other. Your forms develop the skills necessary for your self-defense abilities and your techniques you're going to use. And for many years, all of us have looked at it and said, okay, there are specific combinations in a kata that we bunkai, that we figure out, what we should be doing in a self-defense situation. I would challenge anybody to say that, man, if you do that entire combination as a self-defense and it happens to you in real life, my God, put that down in a book somewhere, because that's going to be 1 in a million. But every move you do in a form has direct application and will have, and many times has direct application to the self-defense moves you're putting together on a real attack situation. So even from the basic block you do at the beginning of a form to how you may block in a self-defense situation, it has direct relationship. The 3 ways that I describe doing forms and what we practice is really complex, John. Method 1, method 2, and method 3. Method 1 is done at the point that you have learned a form, you know it, you know the moves in it, and you somewhat understand it. And I tell people that if you'll practice method 1 the way we do now, you will never, ever forget your form. And method 1, the way we do it is in a very deliberate manner, meaning it appears to be slow, you execute a move, and you don't move from that position, both stance and hand or leg technique, until you fully absorb it, until you feel the stance, you feel the connection, you feel the hand technique or the leg technique actually working. And then you move on to the next one. And you go through an entire form just like that. And maybe you experienced this at the seminar. What I find is absolutely hilarious, especially for black belts, is they are ready to move, man, right now from one technique to another.
Yes.
And what I tell people is come down a little bit and allow yourself time to learn. Not time to learn the kata. Go learn the form, learn those moves, or even learn your self-defense, so you understand it. But once you've achieved that level, then give your body and your brain time to really absorb it all. You can do one technique and sit in that stance for 5 or 6 seconds before you've felt every muscle in your body and you've got the breathing and the inner peace that I've accomplished that technique. Then go on to the next and the next and the next. And when you do a whole form like that, you find out quickly, my God, at the end of it, even a basic form like Tegu 1, I'm exhausted. And it doesn't look like I moved very hard. But you're allowing everything to be absorbed and the opportunity to actually learn it. Our method 2 is staying with that same deliberate movement through the form, except this time you're adding power to every individual technique, and as much power as you could possibly muster. Full power on each technique, whether it's a hand technique, a punch, a block, or a kick. And you're moving through your stances very solidly and deliberately.
So is this like a Chudgeon style method 2? Would that be kind of like a Chudgeon style where everything is tight in your whole body, or are you still loose but throwing?
No, you're still loose, and you're approaching what I call explosion. So that every technique, as you're moving through it, at the very end of the technique, you have exploded all of your energy. If you study Tai Chi or any of the soft arts, you'll learn how to control energy through your body. Those are difficult arts to learn and teach, but once you do learn them, you can actually learn to channel energy through your techniques. And this is the explosion part of the techniques on method 2. And it takes a while, and again, it's an exhaustive type process. It's a great workout before you can move on to method 3. Method 3 is described in one word, John. It is the fight. Method 3 is the fight. Someone watching you do a form in method 3 should be seeing people around you falling to the ground. The the timing, the speed, the power, the accuracy has got to be spot on, and it's not all run together. Forms are broken up into hundreds of techniques or many combinations, and it's important that you don't try and mix them all up as if you're doing one technique after another. It is the expression, both mentally and physically, of the fight, and I would even tell you more mentally than physically. At that point, you've moved into your physical realm. Now it's, what are you actually seeing in your mind? When I do third method forms, I see people that are there in front of me. I don't hear or see anything else around me, but I see the people that are attacking me or I'm defending against, and will move accordingly.
Mhm.
Again, great workout, very exhausting, but extremely fulfilling. And I would tell you this, John, that taking the same approach when you work your self-defense or waza against somebody, if you work method 1 and you throw your initial block and your counter and stay there, look at what you've done, look at where you're at, good, bad, or indifferent, and look at the opportunities based on the initial block and counter that are available to you to follow up on. Give your brain and your body time to absorb all that. Because if you truly understand it, it's not difficult to repeat.
Right.
And then you move that along to second method, obviously controlling your contact points so you don't kill the person you're working with. But it's, again, maximum type power, good contact control. And then third method to me in self-defense or wazas should be a blur to the other person. You literally should be taking them out in 1 to 3 seconds. And the question should be asked from them, what the hell was that?
Right. Break
So that's the the training or teaching approach that we try and take with it. Now, I would tell you that 70% of the time you're doing both of these, method 1, kata and self-defense. 20% of the time you're doing method 2, and 10% of the time you're doing method 3. Because it's very difficult if you try and change that ratio to truly understand it. I can tell you for a fact, I've done this with many black belts. If I can teach you whatever your form is and truly get you to do it method 1, you will never forget it, especially at a tournament.
Yeah, I've been there. I paused and I'm like, what the hell is the next move? And my Grandmaster AJ Perry, he gets on me sometimes. He goes, you have to live the form. You can't just know the form. You have to live it. And talking about method 1, that seems like living the form.
Right. And AJ has a very subtle way of doing it. I love that about him. He gets his points across in a very quiet, subtle way.
It's not always quiet, sir. So yes, I know what you're saying. Great guy. Wouldn't have many other way. So my next question is, you've been doing this for 50 some years. You seem like you're in the best shape of your life. How do you keep going at a high level at an advancing age and practice as hard as you have since day one? Taking care of your body. I know technology's changed and everything like that, but what is your secret to success, sir?
Okay, at this age, John, it begins with understanding a couple basics of your body. One is nutrition. You can't eat a lot of junk. I would tell you, the older I get, the more I like candy. Can't help that, but I stay away from as much of it as I can, except dark chocolate. That's the key. Understanding your nutrition, understanding how to relax, how to not let 90% of what happens in your day bother you, because it's really irrelevant. The only thing you should really do is pay attention to your wife and listen to everything she says. That gives you a very peaceful life.
Really? I
So
don't
it
do
does.
that well. I don't do that well.
You'll learn. So nutrition is very important. Downtime or rest is extremely important especially if you're going to train. And then set your training up so you're not trying to conquer the world every day. when you work out and train, do it in steps and do it in areas that can build upon each other. If you're able to, do some strength training, certainly do that, because the older you get, the more breakdown you're going to have of that aspect, and that goes fast. So you gotta try and keep up with that a bit. If you're doing forms, you've pretty much got the best cardio workout you could possibly have. And then the other key I'd say it's extremely important is you have got to stretch your body. Physics alone and gravity are in complete opposite of that, and it will drag you down. So stretching to me is a kind of a lifeblood, and really allows you to do the things you would really like to do. If you can still kick, and it doesn't matter how high necessarily, if you can still work your legs, stretching becomes even more important because it keeps that flexibility and reduces the pain and so forth, and you're able to use them. Right. But I would tell you that pay attention to nutrition, find out what is stressing you and eliminate that from your life. It makes it a little bit easier after you retire, because you don't have the stress of all of that, plus family and work and everything else. And then just don't stop. It doesn't have to be a monumental workout every day. It has to be 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Some days it ends up being 45 minutes or an hour. And if you find yourself sliding away from that at all, find a partner. Find somebody that you can work out with. And, kind of like what we did in the seminar, it doesn't even have to be anybody in your system or style. Just find somebody you like hanging out with and trade off doing forms in front of each other. Or, what is great is have that person, work your self-defense with you, because they're not going to be of your system or style, and they'll probably come at you differently. And conversely, you'll be able to, show them something that maybe they haven't seen before. Brad and I do a lot of we call continuous waza. And we do this pretty much method one, but it tends to escalate. And a person comes at you with an attack, you block and defend yourself, and without resetting or going back to a chumby position or something, that person who would just defend himself attacks back. The other person defends and attacks. We end up with a 20-minute workout. We're exhausted, and we've explored all kinds of new things in that whole time. Sometimes you attack, you defend, and you freeze, because you got to figure out what should I really do. So it's kind of it's a very interesting and fun thing to do, and it turns out to be a great workout.
Yeah, he did that to me 2 seminars ago, and I froze because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Because he came at me in a way I've never been came at.
It's a learned process. There's nothing cooler than to watch two people, an attacker come at them, watch them block and counter, and they get this look on their face like, I'm not sure what to do next. Well, don't do anything next. Stay right there and figure it out.
Right. No, it was a great technique. I can't wait to do that again. So my last question is martial arts. There's a lot of egos in martial arts. What is the disconnect between the different styles and different people with these egos? I've been trying to figure this out for better part of 5 years now, and I kind of figured out what was going on in martial arts. What do you suppose that's all about?
One word. People are insecure. People are insecure. Back in the day, so to speak, we all had egos. I think the difference then was that you were also taught how to be humble. And if somebody smacked you upside the head with a roundhouse kick, your thought was, what did I do wrong and how do I correct it so it doesn't ever happen again?
Right.
It's changed today, John. Now it's kind of like, what did you do wrong? Because everything I do is right. The egos have changed. without being too critical, I would tell you that today it seems to a lot of people, it's more about how do I show or prove my achievement? We have this thing going on today where everybody's chasing rank. And if there's a seminar I can go to, or if there's something I can do and I get a piece of paper and that piece of paper says, I am this. Well, I'm not sure what this is. And I'm not sure in one seminar you've acquired this. But it's something I can hang on the wall and becomes, I don't know, gratifying or proof, to my insecurity that I am this. I really wish we could get away from that, because I think it inhibits people really training with each other and really achieving something that they may be missing. It's false. It's a false sense of security.
Right.
I know guys that, 1 year they're a first degree black belt, and 5 years later they're a fifth dan. How does that happen?
Yeah.
You can't possibly absorb that much knowledge in that short amount of time. I mean, real knowledge of martial arts.
Right.
So that's the biggest thing that troubles us today. On the kids side of it, it's a whole different realm, because we have let the typical high school, junior high sports attitude, where parents are all about this kid and this kid has to do everything before they get into college. And we've kind of let that creep into the martial arts, which is one of the reasons I have problems with most programs for junior black belts.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God, I can't imagine having a 15-year-old junior black belt get accosted in the street or somewhere else, or, out shopping or something, and the poor kid gets his tail completely beat up from somebody and, kicked down the street. What do you tell them? Because they're telling themselves, I'm a black belt.
Yeah, but those kids aren't fully developed. Like, if I go out, not that I ever would, if I go out and I beat the snot of a 15-year-old, second, third degree black belt, they're not going to be as strong as me. They're not going to be as fast. They might be as fast as me, but they're not going to, I could overpower them. And
Absolutely.
That's what I don't think they 100% understand.
Yeah, neither do I. I'm not sure how it got started, other than, like I said, I tend to think that because our martial arts has shifted more to kids, which is wonderful.
Yes.
For their lives. I think we've many times overlooked what we really need to do for them and in their life. If we award them a black belt, that has to have a very specific definition. And that definition, John, has to include the ability to save your own life and save it in a very effective manner. I don't think we brought that in deep enough. And I think part of the reason we've done it, John, is that kids start at 6 years old. When they're 12 or 14, how do we rank them? What do we do? Because they've got so much time in, and I'm sure they can execute all the techniques we've taught them. And my God, we know they can kick better than a lot of us. But do they truly understand combat? No, they don't. And that's a dilemma.
If we had the answer to that, we'd be millionaires.
Yes, sir. That is a dilemma. There's ways to bring them along and explain to them that, whether it's a black belt with a white stripe or something that, makes them and their parents happy if we're teaching. But we also have to explain, we may need to make sure we explain to them that you have not climbed this mountain yet. You're well on your way, and man, you've got lots of nice, horizons you've gone over, but you've not got to the top of the mountain yet.
Right. Wow. So that concludes us. We've reached an hour here. So I like to keep it, between 45 minutes and an hour, because regular American people don't have that long of attention spans. But I'd love to have you back on again. Is there any parting words you'd like to leave us with, sir?
Yeah, I suppose the biggest thing I would say to people out there is find a good instructor. Figure out why you want to do this. There's a lot of really good reasons. Protecting yourself is probably the biggest to me in today's world. And really get to know your art and hone it to perfection. Now, when you decide to do that, that's probably a lifetime goal, and that's okay. That's good.
Well said, sir. Well said. Well, I'd like to thank you for being on the show. An hour is not enough to cover everything. As you can see, I have a sheet
Sure.
with all kinds of questions here. We only covered like 5 of them. So I'd like to have you back on maybe six months or so, and we'll check in again. And we'll
be my pleasure.
That. Hopefully we can get Master Anita on here as well, because I'd like to hear her, thoughts, because her thoughts aren't going to be your thoughts. They might be close.
They may not be. Yep, Anita would appreciate that.
Yes, sir. So I'd like to thank you for being on the show. As always, like, share, and subscribe to hear the best interviews in martial arts. And as always, Tung Su.
Tung Su. God bless, John.
You too, sir. Stay with me.